The River Oaks estate was so quiet you could hear the rustle of dresses as guests shifted in their seats. Camille stood at the altar, bouquet trembling slightly in her hands. Austin was halfway through his vows when the garden doors opened. Skylar stepped inside, not alone. She held the small hands of Nora and Nico, the twins whose faces mirrored Austin, so strongly that a few guests gasped before they could stop themselves. Whispers shot through the aisle like sparks. A man dropped his program. Someone else covered their mouth. Austin froze mid-sentence. His eyes locked on Skylar, then on the twins. His expression collapsed into shock, the kind that steals all air out of a room. Camille slowly turned her head, confused by the sudden tension. Skylar kept walking, chin lifted, each step steady. The twins stayed close, gripping her fingers, their little shoes tapping softly against the stone pathway. They didn't understand the storm that had just erupted, but every adult in the room did. A hush fell as Skylar reached the back row. The officiant, unaware of the emotional earthquake unfolding, continued the ceremony and asked the familiar question, "Is there anyone here who objects to this union?" Silence, stillness, a moment stretched thin. Then it happened. Nico, curious, innocent, unfiltered, stood on his chair, pointed at Austin, and said in a voice that rang across the entire garden, "Daddy, why you over there?" The entire wedding froze. Forks paused midair. Phones lifted. A few guests gasped, loud enough to echo. Camille's bouquet slipped in her hands. Austin's knees almost buckled. Every camera lens swung towards Skylar and the two children standing beside her. The wedding had just turned into the one moment Austin never wanted the world to see, and the moment Skylar refused to hide from anymore. Before we go any further, let me speak directly to you, the person listening right now. Have you ever cared for someone so deeply that their absence felt heavier than their presence? Have you ever stood in a room where people expected you to fall apart, yet you held your head high because breaking simply wasn't an option? Maybe you've loved someone who didn't choose you back. Maybe you've carried responsibilities alone because someone you trusted walked away. Or maybe you've been placed in a moment where the world assumed you would shrink, but instead, you found a strength you didn't even know you had. Skylar knows that feeling. She knows what it's like to love wholeheartedly and to be left behind. She knows what it means to walk into a space where every eye is judging her, whispering questions, doubting her worth, waiting for her to fold. But today, at this wedding, Skylar didn't break. She walked in with the two little people who gave her purpose, who made every lonely night worth it, who reminded her that she was not defined by the man who left, but by the love she continued to give. And if you've ever had to stand strong in a moment where everything around you told you to step back, this story, her story, will speak to you in ways you don't expect. Now let's step inside Skylar's heart in that exact moment. When she entered that garden, she wasn't just a guest walking into a wedding. She was a woman carrying years of silence, disappointment, and unanswered questions. She felt the weight of the shame Austin tried to bury her with. The man who once promised forever had walked away the moment the responsibility felt too heavy. He built an empire while she built a home. Yet people only ever saw one of those as success. The courage it took to show up anyway. Skylar didn't come to cause a scene. She didn't come to ruin anything. She came because courage sometimes looks like walking through a door that was never meant to make you feel welcome. The uncertainty of how her twins would react, she worried Nora might cling too tightly. She worried Nico might ask questions she wasn't ready to answer. And she feared that seeing Austin might reopen wounds she worked so hard to close. The pain she carried alone for years, all the nights she rocked two babies to sleep, all the early mornings she went to work exhausted but smiling, all the times she whispered answers to questions the twins asked about a father who never knocked. In that single breath, standing at the back of that wedding, every unspoken feeling rushed through her. But she didn't crumble. She didn't panic. She didn't apologize for existing. She simply stood there, a mother, a woman, and someone who refused to let her past define her present. And that's exactly why this moment matters, because Skylar didn't walk in to disrupt a wedding. She walked in to reclaim her dignity. What made Skylar walk into the most important day of Austin's life holding the children he walked away from? What gave her the strength to face a crowd that expected her to shrink? And how did a wedding meant to embarrass her become the very moment that shifted every future in that garden? Austin's, Skylar's, Nora's, Nico's, even Camille's. Because the truth is this: Skylar didn't come to bring chaos. She came to bring clarity. She came to show the world, and Austin, the truth he thought he had left behind. And what happens next will change everything they once knew about love, forgiveness, and the power of standing tall. Before we dive into the full story, welcome back to Stories by Mr. Flex, where life's most powerful lessons come wrapped in unforgettable tales. If you're new to this family, thank you for joining us. Please hit the subscribe button because it helps us continue sharing stories like this across YouTube, and your support means everything. Now, let's go deeper. The first sound Skylar heard as she stepped through the tall garden doors was the faint clink of silverware against glasses, the kind of polite noise that filled high-status Houston events. The River Oaks estate was arranged like something out of a magazine cover, perfectly trimmed hedges, a wide stone pathway, lined with white roses, and rows of guests seated on gold chairs as sunlight painted soft highlights across their faces. But the moment Skylar entered holding the hands of Nora and Nico, the entire scene fell into a stunned quiet. Even the wind seemed to pause. Nora squeezed her mother's fingers, glancing around at the clusters of strangers in fancy clothes. Nico tilted his head, looking straight toward the front where the groom stood. Guests whispered behind raised programs. A woman clutched her pearl necklace. A man blinked rapidly as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Austin stopped breathing when he saw them. He stood at the altar beside Camille, wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than the rent Skylar worked extra shifts to cover. His expression froze in mid-sentence, lips parted, eyes locked onto the twins. His chest rose slowly, as though the sight of them pressed all the air out of him. Camille, who had been smiling confidently only seconds earlier, followed his gaze. Her expression tightened with confusion as she took in Skylar, and then the two children who looked unmistakably connected to her groom. Skylar didn't speed up or slow down. She simply held her chin high, guiding Nora and Nico to the back row. The twins walked with the innocent bounce of 4-year-olds who didn't understand the tension drifting through the air. Skylar felt dozens of eyes on her, trying to figure out who she was, why she was here, and why. Austin looked as if the past had risen out of the ground and walked straight into his ceremony. Her heart pounded, but she didn't waver. The officiant, unaware of the emotional storm unfolding, flipped a page of his script and continued with the ceremony. As he raised his voice to ask the traditional question, the entire garden seemed to hold its breath. Is there anyone here who objects to this union? Silence hovered for a beat. Nico, standing on his little chair so he could see better, spotted Austin again. His small voice rang out across the garden without hesitation. "Daddy, why you over there?" Gasps exploded instantly. A camera shutter went off. Someone whispered, "Did he just say?" Another person pressed a hand to their forehead. Camille's entire body stiffened as she stared at Nico, then at Skylar, then at Austin. Skylar's breath caught, but she didn't move. She placed a steady hand on Nico's back as he pointed directly at Austin with pure innocence. Austin's face crumpled. For a brief moment, Skylar saw the man she once loved, the man who held her in a museum courtyard under city lights, the man who whispered promises into her hair. But pain had carved something new into him. His eyes glistened, not with joy, but with the weight of guilt that had followed him for years. He couldn't look away from Nora and Nico. The officiant's voice faded somewhere in the background, drowned out by the shock gripping every guest in the garden. Even the musicians paused mid-note. Camille gently lowered her bouquet to her side, her expression shifting from confusion to a quiet, unsettling realization. As Nico lowered himself back into his seat, he tugged at Skylar's dress. "Mama," he whispered. "Why Papa not come say hi?" Skylar's throat tightened. She bent down, kissing the top of his head. "It's okay, baby. Just sit with your sister for now," she murmured. Nora leaned into Skylar's arm, wide-eyed. "Mama, people looking at us." "I know, sweetheart," Skylar whispered. "Just stay close." Skylar's pulse hammered. This wasn't the moment she wanted for her children. She never wanted them to feel like a spectacle. But she had walked into this wedding knowing there was no easy outcome. She had come because avoiding Austin forever wouldn't help the twins understand where they came from. And, honestly, Skylar needed closure, even if it came in front of 100 strangers. But as she looked at Austin, whose trembling hands were now gripping the edge of the podium, she realized closure might not come the way she expected. She remembered the night she found out she was pregnant. The hope, the fear, the way Austin had backed away as though the very idea of fatherhood suffocated him. She remembered Dolores holding her close, telling her she didn't need a man to validate her strength. She remembered rocking 2 newborns to sleep, singing soft gospel notes as she promised them a future that didn't depend on anyone who walked away. That life, the one built from pain, resilience, and quiet victories, was the reason she stood tall now instead of shrinking. Austin finally swallowed hard, then stepped away from Camille. He didn't speak yet, but his gaze stayed fixed on the twins. Every step he took toward them seemed heavy, like he was fighting through years of regret. The guests parted slightly, allowing him room to move. Skylar instinctively tightened her grip on Nora and Nico's hands. Her thoughts raced. Why now? What will he say? Does he regret everything? She didn't want to crumble in front of him. Not here. Not in front of a crowd that already saw her as an outsider in a world she never belonged to. But she didn't walk away. She didn't shield herself behind excuses or fear. Because this moment, unexpected, painful, necessary, was no longer about Austin. It was about acknowledging the truth she never wanted her children to grow up confused about. She straightened her shoulders, took a breath, and met Austin's eyes head on. It was the first time in years that they looked at each other without anger, without running, without unfinished sentences hanging between them. Austin opened his mouth, but before he could speak, Skylar heard her own voice tremble. "Let's sit, babies. We'll listen." She settled them back into their seats just as the officiant stepped forward again, struggling to regain control of a ceremony that had clearly veered into uncharted territory. But this wasn't chaos. This was the moment everything finally began. If you're new here, thank you for joining us. Please hit the subscribe button. It helps us share more stories like this with the world. Houston wasn't where Skylar expected her life to change, but it was where everything began. Long before she walked into Austin's wedding with Nora and Nico at her side, there was a night filled with music, warm lights, and a museum gala that smelled faintly of red wine and polished floors. Skylar had worn a vibrant skirt that matched her spirit, bold colors, that moved when she moved, like joy had been sewn into the fabric. She wasn't rich, not even close, but she carried herself with a confidence that made people wonder who she was. She'd been invited through a community arts program she volunteered with, and for her, the evening felt like a small escape from daily responsibilities. She wanted one night to breathe, to laugh, to feel young. Austin entered that same gala with a different weight on his chest. He was already building his company, already being groomed by investors who watched him like he was a prize they owned. He walked in wearing a sharp black suit, shoulders tight, mind calculating future meetings even as he tried to appear relaxed. Then their worlds collided, literally. Skylar was turning toward the refreshment table when Austin bumped into her, his glass tilting just enough for red wine to spill across the edge of her skirt. He gasped, mortified, grabbing napkins and stammering apologies. She looked down, then up, then burst into a laugh so warm it cut straight through his embarrassment. "It's just fabric," she said, waving it off. "I've worn worse to Sunday service." Austin stared at her, caught off guard. He wasn't used to people brushing off mishaps with grace. He wasn't used to being forgiven before he finished apologizing. Something in her laugh loosened the tightness in his chest. "I really am sorry," he said again. "Then make it up to me," she replied with a smirk. "Tell me your name." They talked for the next 10 minutes, then 20, then an hour. What began with spilled wine shifted into rooftop drinks under the Houston skyline. Their conversation flowed easily, her jokes, his curiosity, the way their energies balanced without trying. When they stood to leave, Austin surprised himself by not wanting the night to end. And it didn't. Over the coming weeks, they became inseparable. Their worlds were nothing alike, yet they blended with a natural ease that shocked both of them. Skylar came from a family where cousins popped in unannounced, neighbors brought extra plates of food, and laughter lived in every corner of the house. She brought Austin into that world immediately, and he fell in love with the noise, the hugs, the constant warmth. Skylar's mother, Dolores, wrapped Austin in a hug the first time she met him, feeding him collard greens before he could finish saying his name. Skylar's nieces and nephews climbed over him like a jungle gym, demanding stories about animals or superheroes, and Austin played along without hesitation. He read Shakespeare lines in dramatic voices because Skylar whispered, "Go on, give them a show." And he loved how her eyes sparkled when they laughed. In return, Austin invited Skylar into his world. Corporate lunches in downtown Houston, tech events, formal, dinners where she wore dresses she found at thrift stores and still managed to outshine everyone in the room. He showed her River Oaks polo matches, rooftop lounges and business, circles where people spoke in stock percentages and projections. Skylar didn't understand his world, not entirely, but she understood him. And that was enough. Their second year together felt golden. Austin introduced her as his fiancée at a picnic in Herman Park, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead as families strolled by, unaware of how big the moment was for them. He whispered, "You're the one I want," when no one else was around. Skylar carried that sentence in her heart like a treasure. But even in love, cracks can form. Austin wanted structure, predictability, a life that moved in straight lines. Skylar was rooted in community, flexibility, and compassion. She canceled a weekend trip with him once to help her neighborhood recover after a hurricane. And although Austin understood, he didn't know how to express his frustration. His parents didn't approve of their relationship, not openly but through tight smiles and subtle remarks about different backgrounds. Skylar felt the shift before she heard the words. There were nights when Austin sat quietly on their couch, staring at the ceiling like he was wrestling with thoughts he refused to voice. Then came the morning that changed everything. She found out she was pregnant while making breakfast. The test showed 2 pink lines, and her heart raced with fear and excitement. When she turned to Austin, she spoke softly. "I'm pregnant, with twins." For a fraction of a second, she expected joy. Instead, Austin's face drained of color. His hand shook as he set down his coffee. He whispered, "Twins?" Like the word itself frightened him. Skylar stepped closer. "I know it's a lot, but we can handle it." He ran both hands through his hair. "You don't understand. 2 babies. I'm not ready for this. My parents already question our relationship. My company is at a turning point. I can't." Skylar felt something break quietly inside her. "Austin," she whispered, "these are our children." His eyes flickered with conflict, then fear overshadowed everything. "I'm sorry," he said. "I can't do this right now." He walked out, just like that. Skylar stood in the kitchen holding her stomach, wondering how a love that felt so real could collapse in seconds. Dolores moved in the next day. She cooked, prayed, comforted, and reminded Skylar that she wasn't alone. When Nora and Nico were born months later, Skylar held them and thought, "I'll protect you, even if I have to do it alone." And she did. While Skylar learned to cradle babies with one arm and cook with the other, Austin built an empire, wealth, recognition, a mansion in Houston Heights. But none of it softened the emptiness he carried at night. 2 different worlds, 2 different paths, one unfinished story. Raising twins alone was never part of Skylar's plan, but life didn't give her space to collapse. It pushed her into a new version of herself, one she hadn't realized existed until she needed her own strength most. The first weeks home with Nora and Nico were a blur of feedings, soft humming, and sleepless nights. She kept a small lamp burning beside the crib, casting a gentle glow over their faces as she sang melodies her mother used to sing to her. At 3 a.m, when exhaustion sat heavy on her shoulders, she would rock them in her arms and whisper, "Mama's here. Mama's got you." Those words became her anthem. Dolores stayed close through everything. She moved with practiced ease, swaddling babies, heating bottles, folding laundry, and keeping Skylar's spirits afloat when she felt the ache of doing parenthood alone. On Sunday afternoons, Dolores would fix 2 plates, one for Skylar, and one for the quiet grief she never wanted her daughter to carry alone. Yet she never spoke Austin's name unless Skylar did. She understood some wounds needed silence before they healed. Months passed, and the twins grew. Nora loved to crawl into every corner of the apartment, fascinated by cabinets and shadows on the wall. Nico was gentler, always at Skylar's knee, watching her with wide, thoughtful eyes, as if studying the world through her. Their personalities blossomed, filling the home with laughter and little shrieks that softened even the hardest moments. Skylar returned to work part-time at a community nonprofit that specialized in programs for children and families. Balancing it all wasn't easy. She woke before the sun, packing lunches, dressing toddlers, and organizing schedules. She dropped them off at a small daycare where the teachers adored them instantly, then drove across town with determination sitting in her chest like a drumbeat. Her work mattered. She helped families apply for grants, supported single parents navigating obstacles, organized reading circles for kids, and even helped run mentorship events. Parents often thanked her, unaware that she too was learning how to stand strong while piecing together her own life. There were days she sat in her car after work and cried, not from sadness, but from relief that she somehow made it through another day. Her community became her village. Older women in the neighborhood brought meals when they knew she was exhausted. Neighbors stepped in with childcare when she had late meetings. Her cousins checked in with jokes that always made her laugh. Skylar didn't have Austin, but she had people who saw her effort and respected her journey. Meanwhile, Austin's life moved forward in a completely different direction. His company exploded in popularity, drawing investors from all corners of the country. He graced magazine covers, appeared on business panels, and lived in a pristine home in Houston Heights. Expensive cars lined his driveway. Luxury trips filled his weekends. He dated women who fit neatly into the image the world expected of him. Polished, ambitious, perfectly styled. But none of them stayed. None of them made him laugh without restraint. None of them held his attention once the cameras stopped clicking. Late at night, Austin sometimes sat alone in his large kitchen, staring at the empty counter as if waiting for something to appear. He never said it aloud, but he felt the absence Skylar left behind. He remembered the way she laughed when he spilled wine on her skirt, the way she held his hand during thunderstorms, the way her nieces cheered when he read stories in silly voices. He buried those memories under spreadsheets and travel plans, but they resurfaced anyway. One afternoon, Austin attended a tech conference in Dallas, surrounded by applause and flashing lights. When he stepped off the stage, an audience member approached him and congratulated him with admiration in their eyes. Austin smiled politely, but as he walked backstage, the praise didn't settle the way it used to. Something felt incomplete. He was winning professionally but losing personally, though he'd never admit it. Skylar, however, didn't spend her days thinking about Austin. She didn't have the energy for that. She was too busy tying shoelaces, managing tantrums, preparing toddler meals, and finding small moments of joy in the chaos. She took Nora and Nico to local parks, letting them run across fields while she chatted with other parents. She taught them songs from her childhood, read bedtime stories every night, and filled their world with comfort and routine. Her journey wasn't glamorous, but it was real, and it was shaping her into someone stronger than she'd ever imagined. By the twins' third birthday, Skylar had secured a promotion at the nonprofit. Her supervisor praised her leadership, noting how she inspired volunteers and built trust in the community. Skylar felt a mix of pride and disbelief. She remembered the day Austin walked out, how small and unsteady she'd felt. Now she stood in a conference room presenting ideas that would help hundreds of families. She looked at the faces around her and realized she'd created a life defined not by abandonment, but by resilience. Nora and Nico thrived too. They were curious, affectionate children who loved bedtime stories, sprinklers, in the yard, and helping Dolores bake cornbread on weekends. At church, they greeted everyone with bright smiles, and older members often teased, "These babies got a joy on them." Skylar smiled proudly every time she heard that. Still, some nights carried quiet shadows. Nora would sit on Skylar's lap and ask, "Mama, where Papa?" Skylar would hold her daughter close and say, "Papa lives far away, sweetheart, but you are loved every day." It was the truth she felt safe giving them. Other nights, Nico would climb into her bed, press his head against her shoulder and whisper, "Mama, one day Papa come?" She would stroke his hair and kiss his cheek, saying softly, "One day, maybe." She never promised what she couldn't guarantee. But she did promise herself this: Nora and Nico would never feel unloved. They would never feel abandoned. They would always have a home built on warmth, patience, and understanding. Her life differed completely from Austin's, but she wasn't envious. She wasn't bitter. She had grown past that. She was building something lasting, something more important than anything she'd lost. Skylar didn't know that soon an invitation would arrive that placed her strength, her past, and her future in the same room. But for now, she kissed her twins goodnight, held them close, and whispered, the same promise she whispered the first night they came home. "Mama's here. Always." The day the envelope arrived, the twins were sprawled on the living room floor, coloring, humming to themselves while Skylar sorted through the mail. Most days brought nothing more than bills, nonprofit flyers, or notes from daycare. But today, an envelope stood out, sleek, heavy, and embossed with gold edges that glimmered beneath the hallway light. Her name, Skylar DeLuca, was written in elegant handwriting that made her heart beat slow and heavy. She already knew who it was from before she flipped it over. Austin's company letterhead, sharp, clean, corporate, the kind he used when he wanted to send a message without speaking. Skylar inhaled slowly, steadying the sudden tremor in her hand. She took the envelope to the dining table, the twins glancing up with mild curiosity before returning to their drawings. The weight of the letter felt symbolic, like something that shouldn't matter anymore, yet somehow still did. She slid her finger beneath the seal and opened it. Her eyes traced the gold filigree, the polished lettering, the words that nearly knocked the breath from her chest. You are cordially invited to the wedding celebration of Austin De Luca and Camille Laurent. Skylar froze. The air felt thick. Her fingers tightened around the card. She'd known Austin had moved on. He'd been pictured at events, interviewed beside ambitious women who matched his polished world. But an invitation sent directly to her home felt intentional, not an oversight, not a courtesy. Something else. Nico noticed first. He crawled into her lap, placing his tiny palm against her cheek. "Mama, why you look sad?" Skylar blinked, forcing a smile she didn't feel. "I'm all right, baby." "Mama's just reading." Nora climbed into the chair beside her, swinging her legs as she reached for the shiny invitation. "Pretty card," she said, tapping the gold border. Skylar kissed her forehead and gently took the card back, her mind spinning. Why had Austin sent this? Was it guilt? Closure? Or something colder, something rooted in the man he became after he left? A quiet knock sounded on her apartment door. She exhaled, relieved. It was Imani, right on time. They'd planned to visit their favorite nail salon for a rare break. Skylar opened the door, trying to mask the shock written all over her face. Imani squinted. "Girl, what happened? You look like you saw a ghost." Skylar held out the invitation. Imani snatched it, skimmed it, then practically shouted, "He invited you to his wedding? Is he out of his mind?" Skylar let out a laugh, one without humor. "Apparently not." Imani dropped onto the couch, legs crossed dramatically as she stared at the ceiling. "This man is unbelievable. First, he disappears. Second, he builds some big fancy life. Third, he sends you an invitation like you're supposed to clap for him." Skylar rubbed her temples. "Truthfully, I don't know why he sent it. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe his assistant thought it was the polite thing to do." Imani raised her eyebrows. "Polite?" "Skylar, his assistant knows exactly who you are. Everybody connected to him knows. You carried his twins. You rebuilt your life. And he sends you this?" She held up the card like it was contaminated. "This feels like a stunt." Skylar swallowed around the knot in her throat. What would even be the point of inviting me? To prove something? To show how far he's moved on? Imani leaned forward. "Maybe he wants to see if you're still hurting. Maybe he's trying to make himself feel bigger, richer, happier. But let me tell you one thing. No man invites the woman he left behind, unless he's checking whether she's still watching." Skylar glanced over at the twins who were now playing with blocks on the rug. "Imani, I haven't seen him in years. The twins have never met him. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this." Imani softened. She touched Skylar's arm. "You do what a strong woman does. You walk in there with your head up and your babies beside you, not to cause drama, not to start anything, but because he needs to see what he walked away from." Skylar stared at her, surprised. Imani continued, voice steady and fierce. "Skylar, you raised those kids. You built a home. You didn't fall apart. You thrived. And he needs to see that. Not for him," she tapped Skylar's chest, "for you, because you deserve to walk into any room and feel equal." Skylar swallowed hard, the words sinking deep. "I don't want to embarrass anyone," she whispered. "You won't," Imani said. "You'll show up as yourself, as the woman who carried 2 children without a man's help, as the mother who never once hid from the truth." Skylar glanced at Nora and Nico again. They laughed as they knocked down the block tower, blissfully unaware of the adult world swirling around them. Imani placed a warm hand on Skylar's shoulder. "Girl, say it with me, I'm going to that wedding." Skylar hesitated, then straightened her back. "I'm going," she said quietly. "No, say it like you mean it." Skylar inhaled deeply, the decision solidifying in her chest. "I'm going to the wedding, with my babies." Imani beamed. "That's what I'm talking about." Skylar stood, looking down at the embossed invitation one last time. The gold letters no longer felt intimidating. They felt like a challenge she was finally ready to face. She walked over to the twins, kneeling between them. "Mommy's going to need you two to be on your best behavior soon," she said softly. Nora giggled. "We gonna dress fancy?" "Yes," Skylar smiled. "Very fancy." Nico clapped his hands. "I be good, Mama." Skylar pulled them close, kissing their hair. "We're doing this together." She didn't know exactly what awaited her at that wedding, but she knew she wasn't walking in as the woman Austin left. She was walking in as the woman she became. Before we continue, thank you for watching Stories by Mr. Flex. If this journey touches you, don't forget to like the video so more people can find stories just like this one. The days following the arrival of the invitation felt different in Skylar's home. Nothing shifted outwardly. The same morning rush, the same twin chatter, the same dinners shared with Dolores, but something inside Skylar had awakened. A spark, a steadiness, a reminder that she wasn't the same woman Austin had walked away from years ago. She was stronger now. She was a mother. She had learned how to make life work even when life bent her in ways she didn't expect, and now she had a decision to honor. The morning after she told Imani she would attend the wedding, Skylar sat Nora and Nico at the kitchen table. Bowls of oatmeal steamed in front of them while sunlight filtered through the blinds, striping the twins' faces in soft golden lines. "Okay, loves," Skylar began, tying the last knot on Nico's shoelaces. "Mama needs to teach you two something important." Nora looked up with a spoonful of oatmeal halfway to her mouth. "What is it, Mama?" "We're going to a special event soon," Skylar explained gently. "It's a place where we have to use our very best manners. We'll walk quietly, we'll hold hands, and we'll listen very carefully." Nico gasped as if she had just invited him to meet superheroes. "Fancy place?" "Very fancy," Skylar smiled. Nora clapped, delighted. "We gonna be pretty." "Yes, baby," Skylar said, brushing her daughter's curls from her forehead. "Very pretty." They spent the next half hour practicing. Skylar demonstrated how to say hello politely, how to sit still without fidgeting, and how to whisper instead of shout. Nora imitated her mother with dramatic exaggeration, prompting Skylar to hide her smile. Nico took every instruction seriously, as if he believed the wedding depended entirely on him. When Dolores arrived later that afternoon, she watched them rehearse with pride in her eyes. "Look at these two," she said, hands on her hips, "acting like they got meetings with the mayor." Skylar laughed softly. "Mama, I just want them to feel confident. I don't want them to walk in scared." Dolores took Skylar's hands. "Baby, they'll be fine because you're leading them. They follow your heart before they follow your steps." Skylar breathed in those words, letting their truth settle. Later that week, Skylar and Dolores took the twins shopping for outfits. The store wasn't extravagant, just a modest boutique in a Houston plaza, but it had everything they needed. Racks of children's formal wear lined the walls, tiny dresses and jackets that made Skylar's heart warm with anticipation. Nora made a beeline for the dresses, her fingers brushing fabrics like she was searching for something that felt like her. She paused at a deep plum dress with soft layers that shimmered gently under the lights. "This one," Nora whispered. "It'd feel like a princess." Skylar held it up, marveling at how perfectly it fit her daughter's personality. "Let's try it, sweetheart." Meanwhile, Nico wandered toward the boys' section. He pointed at a small bow tie set displayed on a mannequin. "Mama, I want this," he said proudly. Skylar picked it up and chuckled. "You trying to look sharp for people you don't even know?" Nico puffed his chest. "I'm big boy." Dolores laughed. Lord, he got confidence already. When the twins changed into their outfits, Skylar felt time slow. Nora twirled in her plum dress, the skirt lifting just enough to make her giggle. Nico smoothed his tiny jacket with both hands, nodding to himself in the mirror like a grown man preparing for a business meeting. Skylar pressed a hand to her chest. They looked beautiful, not because of the clothes, but because they stood so tall, unaware of the weight of the world behind the event they were preparing for. Dolores stepped beside her. "You did good, Sky. Real good." Skylar swallowed, eyes warming. "Mama, I just want them to feel safe, no matter what happens there." Dolores squeezed her shoulder. "They will. They feel safe with you." As they left the store, the twins insisted on holding hands as they walked through the parking lot, their small shadows stretching out beside them. Skylar felt something loosen inside her, not fear, but a quiet acceptance of the journey ahead. Back home, Skylar laid the outfits across her bed, smoothing the fabric with slow, deliberate strokes. The wedding was still days away, yet she felt its presence drawing closer, tugging on old memories she had buried deep. She wasn't attending to confront anyone. She wasn't attending to impress anyone. She was attending because she deserved closure. Her children deserved truth. and she refused to let Austin's choices write the final chapter of her story. That evening, Skylar staged a little rehearsal. She taped a line on the living room floor and told the twins it was their walkway. "We'll walk like this at the event," she explained, demonstrating confident but calm steps. Nora copied her mother, lifting her chin. "Mama, like Queen?" "Yes," Skylar said with a soft smile. "Exactly like that." Nico followed, taking careful steps with his bow tie a little crooked, even though he wasn't wearing it yet. "I do it, Mama. I don't fall." Dolores sat on the couch, cheering them on. "Look at y'all, walking like you got cameras watching," Nora gasped. "Cameras?" Skylar laughed. "Not like that, baby. Just means you walk proud." Then she knelt between them, placing a palm on each small chest. "When we go to this event," she said slowly, "we walk in proud, we walk in strong, and we stay together, okay?" The twins nodded with wide, serious eyes. "We walk proud," Nora repeated. "We stay together," Nico added. Skylar kissed both of their foreheads. That's right. It was in that moment, with her children standing confidently in front of her, that Skylar understood something deeply. She wasn't preparing for Austin. She wasn't preparing for judgment. She was preparing to show up for herself. She was ready. If you're enjoying this chapter so far, tap the like button so more people can discover these powerful stories on Stories by Mr. Flex. The morning of the wedding arrived with a quiet stillness. Skylar woke before her alarm, blinking up at the soft shadows on her ceiling. For a moment she lay still, listening to the faint hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of a truck backing up somewhere down the block. Today wasn't just any day. Today she was walking into a world that had once shut her out, and she wasn't walking alone. She sat up slowly, taking a breath that filled her with a mix of calm and nerves. In the next room she could hear Nora singing to her dolls, her little voice bright and pure. Nico hummed along, tapping something rhythmically on the floor. Skylar rose and stepped into their doorway. The twins looked up instantly. "Mama, today's the day?" Nora asked, eyes big with excitement. Skylar nodded. "Yes, sweetheart. Today's the day." Nico scrambled up. "We wear our fancy clothes now." In a minute, Skylar laughed. "Breakfast first." They gathered in the kitchen around bowls of fruit and waffles. Dolores arrived shortly after, carrying a bag filled with backup snacks. Hairpins and tissues. Mama preparedness, she called it. "You sleep all right?" Dolores asked, touching Skylar's cheek affectionately. "Not really," Skylar admitted with a soft smile. "But I'm ready." Dolores nodded. "You're stronger than you know. Don't forget that." The twins ate quickly, unable to hide their excitement. When breakfast ended, Skylar dressed them carefully. Nora in her deep plum dress, Nico in his tiny jacket and bow tie. The twins couldn't stop staring at themselves in the mirror, turning their heads to watch their outfits shimmer and straighten. "You two look like royalty," Skylar said, smoothing Nora's hair. Nora giggled. "Mama, we look fancy." "Yes, baby. Very fancy." Skylar stepped into her own outfit last, the rich burgundy dress that hugged her waist and flowed elegantly at her knees. Dolores helped pin the floral accessory into her hair. When Skylar turned to the mirror, she paused. She didn't look like the heartbroken woman Austin left years ago. She didn't look like someone walking into a painful memory. She looked like a mother, a survivor, a woman stepping into her own light. A soft knock echoed on the bedroom door. "Mama." Nico peeked in. "We ready?" Skylar took a deep breath. "Yes, baby." "Let's go." They walked toward the car, Nora holding Skylar's left hand, Nico gripping her right. Dolores followed behind, watching them with the proudest expression. Once everyone was buckled in, Skylar started the engine. The twins kicked their feet in excitement. "Where we going again?" Nico asked. "To an event," Skylar said gently. "A very important one." Nora leaned forward in her seat. "Mama, you nervous?" Skylar glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "A little. But nervous doesn't mean scared. Sometimes it just means something matters." Nora nodded like she understood completely. The drive toward River Oaks took them past familiar corners of Houston. Third Ward melted into Midtown, Midtown into Montrose. The scenery shifted, old brick apartments giving way to tall glass buildings, independent shops giving way to immaculate lawns and gated properties. The deeper they drove into River Oaks, the more the world changed. Manicured hedges framed each sprawling home. Streets curved elegantly around towering trees. Cars that cost more than some houses floated past them, polished enough to reflect sunlight in bright, precise lines. Nora pressed her face to the window. "Mama, people live here?" "Yes," Skylar murmured. Nico whispered, "They rich?" Dolores chuckled softly, but didn't answer. Instead, she rested her hand on Skylar's shoulder from the back seat. "You're holding your own, baby," she said quietly. "Remember that." Skylar nodded, but didn't reply. Her stomach tightened the closer they got. Memories flickered, laughter shared with Austin, the way he once guided her through these very streets with pride, the image of the life he imagined but never let her step into fully. Now she was returning without apology. The GPS directed them toward a long driveway, bordered by towering magnolia trees. The estate stood at the end, grand, sprawling, with white pillars and staff guiding luxury cars into orderly rows. Skylar pulled into a designated guest area. A valet approached, but she waved him off gently. She didn't want to hand over her keys today. She needed control over at least one thing. "All right," she said softly. "We're here." She stepped out of the car and rounded to the back doors. Nora hopped out first, smoothing her dress with careful fingers. Nico followed, straightening his bow tie. Dolores gathered her bag of essentials. "I'll walk you to the entrance, then find my seat." "Thank you, Mama," Skylar replied. They walked toward the estate. The sound of music floated through the air, soft, elegant, meant to impress. As they approached the guests gathering near the entrance, conversations dipped. Heads turned. Whispered questions drifted around them. Who is she? Is she on the list? Those children, do they belong to? No, it can't be. Skylar kept her shoulders square, her pace steady. The twins stayed close, just like they practiced. A bridesmaid at the check-in table looked up, surprise flashing across her face before she masked it with a polite smile. "Welcome," she said gently. "You must be Skylar DeLuca?" Skylar nodded, unreadable. "Yes." The bridesmaid swallowed, nodding quickly. "Of course. Your seats are just through the garden." But her eyes dropped to the twins. Shock, confusion, recognition. Skylar thanked her and moved forward with a quiet grace. As they walked deeper into the garden, guests continued whispering. Some frowned. Some looked stunned. Others simply observed, unsure of the story, but sensing they had just witnessed the opening scene of something important. And then, from across the aisle, Austin turned his head. The moment his gaze fell on them, Skylar, Nora, Nico, his entire face changed. What had been a curated expression for his wedding guests melted into something raw, shaken, and painfully familiar. He froze. His hands tightened at his sides. His breath caught. Skylar stopped walking for half a second, steadying herself. This was the moment she prepared for. This was the moment she feared. This was the moment she claimed her strength. Nora squeezed her hand. "Mama, he looking—" "Yes, baby," Skylar whispered. "I know." Nico raised his hand to wave before Skylar gently lowered it. The world around them held still. The wedding hadn't started yet, but the truth had. The garden fell into a gentle hush as guests settled into their seats. The warm Houston sunlight filtering through the branches overhead. The wedding planner signaled to the musicians, and a soft melody floated through the air. Skylar guided Nora and Nico to their assigned seats, 3 chairs placed near the back, almost as if the bride's side planned to keep her out of sight. But nothing could hide her today. Not from Austin. Not from the truth that had finally come to claim its place. Nora climbed into her chair and let her legs swing. Nico perched beside her, eyes wide as he studied the aisle decorated with white petals. Skylar sat between them, her heartbeat a steady drum behind her ribs, her palms warm from holding the twins' hands. From where she sat, Skylar could see Austin standing at the front of the garden beside Camille. He wasn't smiling anymore, not even trying. His gaze kept drifting, searching, and every time it moved her way, he froze like he wasn't sure if she was real. Skylar inhaled slowly, steadying herself. "You came here to stand tall. You came here for your children. You came here to close the door on the past, or walk through it with courage." The officiant stepped forward and lifted a microphone. "Dearly beloved." A light breeze swept across the garden, stirring the fabric of Skylar's dress and making Nora nuzzle against her shoulder. Nico laid his small hand on Skylar's thigh, grounding her. Skylar forced herself to look forward. Austin stood rigid, unable to tear his eyes away. Camille, standing next to him in her elegant gown, noticed immediately. A subtle tension pulled at her jaw. She followed his gaze and saw Skylar, and then she saw the twins. A ripple of discomfort flickered across her expression. Skylar swallowed. She hadn't come to hurt Camille. She hadn't come to ruin anyone's day. But the truth had a way of rising when it was ready, and today, the truth had chosen its moment. The officiant continued. We gather here today to celebrate the union of Austin DeLuca and Camille Laurent. Guests nodded politely. Some fanned themselves. Others leaned in to whisper. Whispers Skylar knew were about her. Is that really her? She brought children? Are they? Skylar kept her gaze forward. She wasn't here to manage their opinions. Nora tugged her sleeve. Mama. What they doing now? They're talking about marriage, baby, Skylar whispered. Just listen quietly. Nico leaned close. Mama, why he keep looking at you? Skylar's heart tightened. Because he recognizes us. The officiant progressed through the opening remarks. Camille smiled when expected, but the smile trembled. She wasn't naive. She could sense Austin slipping away with each passing second, his face shifting from calm to shaken. Finally, they reached the pivotal moment, the one every guest knew was coming. If anyone here believes this union should not proceed, speak now. Time froze. The garden stilled. Even the musicians stopped mid-note. Skylar's breath caught. She hadn't planned to disrupt anything. She hadn't come for drama or spectacle. She had come to stand in truth. But now that the words hovered in the air, now that Austin couldn't pretend he didn't see her, now that every whisper circled around her presence, her heart raced. Nora sensed her mother's tension and wrapped her tiny hand around Skylar's wrist. Mama, you okay? Skylar nodded slowly, even though she wasn't entirely sure. Yes, baby, I'm all right. Nico sat up taller. Mama, why they waitin'? Skylar opened her mouth to answer, but before she could speak, every pair of eyes turned forward as the officiant asked again, louder this time. Speak now, or... Before the sentence finished, something unexpected happened. Nico stood. It was so sudden Skylar barely had time to react. Her son, her sweet, bold son, pushed himself to his feet, small chest rising with determination. A hush swept through the garden. Nico's voice rang out with the raw honesty only a child possessed. Daddy, why you over there? A collective gasp broke across the crowd like a wave. Skylar's heart slammed against her ribs. Nico, she whispered urgently, reaching to guide him back into his seat. But he remained standing, eyes locked on Austin, who stared back in complete shock. Nora stood next, almost instinctively, gripping the back of her chair for balance. Papa, she called, her little voice ringing through the garden. Why you not with us? The guests erupted in whispers, hands covering mouths, eyes widening, confusion spreading like wildfire. Camille stiffened, her fingers tightening around her bouquet. She looked from the twins to Skylar, then to Austin, her expression shifting from confusion to realization. Austin's face drained of color. He couldn't move, couldn't speak. His entire world had just been exposed by two children he had never met, children who looked just like him. Skylar's pulse roared in her ears. She pulled Nico gently toward her, whispering, Baby, sit down, please. But Nico wasn't scared. He wasn't embarrassed. He was simply speaking the truth he felt in his heart. Austin finally took a step backward, his hand covering his mouth. Emotion flickered across his features, disbelief, regret, longing, something close to heartbreak. The officiant looked from Austin to the children, completely unsure how to proceed. Camille's shoulders dropped as the weight of the moment pressed down. She lifted her eyes toward Austin, and for the first time, she understood that. Something profound had unfolded long before she ever walked down this aisle. Guests leaned toward each other. Is that his? They looked just like him. Oh my goodness. Skylar held her children close, sitting tall, her face steady even though her insides shook. She hadn't come to make a scene. But this moment, this raw, unfiltered truth, had arrived whether she wanted it or not. Austin wasn't just frozen anymore. He was unraveling inside, because the past he tried to outrun was now staring back at him with wide, innocent eyes. And the wedding, it would never be the same. For a long heartbeat, the wedding garden remained suspended in silence. Even the birds seemed to still themselves, as if the entire estate were, holding its breath after the sound of two small voices shattered the air. Nora and Nico stood beside Skylar, both looking forward with innocent expectation. They weren't aware of the storm they had just unleashed. They weren't aware of the adults whose beautifully crafted world had cracked down the middle. They simply knew they had seen someone they recognized, the father they had heard stories about, the man they had been told lived somewhere far away. Austin stood frozen at the altar, staring at the twins as if the world had shifted beneath him. His knees bent slightly, his hand lowering from his mouth as he whispered, barely audible, "Nico? Nora?" Skylar stiffened. She had imagined many scenarios, but hearing Austin say their names, he had never spoken in their presence before, pierced her unexpectedly. For a moment she wasn't the strong woman walking into a storm. She was the young woman who had once believed he would be present. For everything, the baby showers, the ultrasounds, the first cries, but he hadn't been there for any of it. Now he stared at the children he had spent years avoiding, and in his eyes lived something she had never seen on him before, a raw mix of joy, regret, disbelief, and something close to yearning. Camille saw it too. The bride stood rigid, bouquet trembling in her hands. She looked from Austin to the twins, then back at Austin. Her lips parted, confusion etched across her face. She knew now what she had been sensing from the moment Skylar walked in, something bigger than an old relationship. Something profound, something undeniable. Nico tugged at Skylar's fingers and whispered loudly, "Mama, he hear me?" Skylar nodded gently, her throat tight. "Yes, baby. He hears you." Nora leaned forward in her chair, her tiny hand reaching out toward the aisle. "Papa." Her voice was soft, hopeful, filled with familiarity she didn't fully understand. Austin's breath hitched. Then something inside him broke open. Slowly, as if moving through heavy air, he stepped away from Camille. The guests watched in stunned silence as he descended the single step. From the altar, his polished shoes crunching softly on the stone path. His face was crumpled with emotion he could no longer hide. He walked toward Skylar and the twins. Skylar's pulse raced. She wasn't ready for this. She wasn't ready for him to stand so close, to look at the children he had left behind, as if realizing the enormity of what he'd missed. "Skylar," he whispered. His voice cracked, heavy with years of unspoken words. Nora shuffled in front of her mother, staring up at him with bright eyes. "Papa, you look different from TV." The guests gasped. A few muffled their laughs, not out of mockery, but out of sheer shock at the candid words only a child could deliver. Austin knelt. A billionaire, a groom, a man who had once run from responsibility, now on his knees at the feet of two 4-year-olds. He held out his hands, as if afraid to touch them without permission. "Nora, Nico, it's really you." Nico stepped closer, inspecting Austin's face with a seriousness that made Skylar ache. Then he reached up slowly and touched Austin's cheek with one small palm. "Papa," he said softly. "You real?" Austin closed his eyes, overwhelmed. "Yes, buddy. I'm real." Nora placed both hands on his shoulders, studying him with innocent curiosity. "Mama say you live far. You come now?" Austin's throat tightened. "I came because I should have been here years ago." The guests swallowed collectively, moved by the rawness of the moment. Skylar's breathing grew uneven. She wasn't prepared for this, for her children to see Austin melt before them, for him to meet them in a way she had once prayed for during long nights holding two crying newborns. She felt everything, anger, relief, confusion, protectiveness, flooding through her at once. Camille steadied herself at the altar, watching the scene unfold with growing clarity, and though her heart must have been breaking, she didn't move to interrupt. She seemed to understand that something sacred was happening, something she couldn't compete with. Nico wrapped his arms around Austin's neck, climbing into a hug without hesitation. It stunned Austin completely. His arms circled Nico gently, almost trembling. He inhaled the scent of his son's hair, something he'd never experienced before, and a tear slipped down his cheek. "I'm so sorry," he whispered into Nico's curls. Nora leaned into Austin as well, her little hand resting on his chest. "Papa, why you cry?" Austin shook his head, voice thick. "Because Papa missed too much." Skylar looked away briefly, her vision blurring. She had always known this moment would be complicated, but she didn't expect to feel the sting of old wounds reopening. She reminded herself quietly that this wasn't about her pain right now, it was about her children, finally seeing the man whose existence had always been spoken of in soft, carefully chosen words. Houston society members sat frozen, every gaze fixed on the emotional reunion happening before them. These were people accustomed to polished events, perfect reputations, curated images. But today, they were witnessing something real, something that stripped away all pretense. A mother with unwavering strength. A father with long-buried regret. Two children whose innocence cut through years of silence. Austin eventually loosened his embrace, sitting back on his heels as he wiped his eyes. He looked up at Skylar with a vulnerability she hadn't seen since their early years together. "Sky," he whispered, May I talk to them?" Skylar swallowed, sliding her hand across Nora's back. "They're listening." Austin turned toward the twins again. "I know I wasn't here. I know I missed birthdays, first steps, bedtime stories, all the moments a father should never miss." His voice cracked. "But if you'll let me, I want to be here now." Nico blinked. "We let you. Right, Mama?" Skylar opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She felt the weight of every choice she had made. Every night she stayed up wondering how she would explain this moment someday. Nora placed her hand on Skylar's knee. "Mama, Papa nice." Skylar forced a soft exhale. "Yes, baby." "He's trying." Austin stood slowly, his eyes never leaving Skylar's. A plea lived in them, not for forgiveness, not yet, but for the chance to take one step toward the family he'd once abandoned. The garden remained silent. The wedding had paused. But life had resumed, and nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again. The garden remained frozen, caught between a wedding that could no longer continue and a truth that refused to stay hidden. Even the officiant seemed unsure whether to step back or attempt to regain control of the ceremony. But it no longer mattered. The moment had shifted entirely. The story unfolding now was no longer about flowers or vows. It was about a man facing what he had walked away from, and a woman who refused to let her past dim her dignity. Camille stood at the altar, bouquet trembling. She had always prided herself on being composed, but this was different. Her fiancé had just knelt before two children, calling him Papa. Her posture softened, her eyes lowered. She understood with a devastating clarity that this ceremony was no longer hers. Her mother whispered urgently from the front row, but Camille held up one hand, gracefully, decisively, signaling for silence. Whatever was happening, she refused to turn it into a spectacle of anger or humiliation. She whispered, barely audible, "Let them have their moment." Skylar heard it, and despite everything, a quiet respect flickered in her chest. Meanwhile, Austin stood, still overwhelmed, still absorbing the reality of two children who had wrapped their small arms around him without hesitation. He wiped his face quickly, attempting to steady himself. But the raw truth lingered in his expression. He was undone. The crowd shifted nervously. Skylar rose from her seat with slow, steady control. She gathered Nora and Nico close, her hands resting protectively on their shoulders. The years of struggle, resilience, and rebuilding rested silently behind her eyes. "Skylar," Austin said, breath unsteady. I don't even know where to begin." Skylar met his gaze with a calm that had taken 4 years to build. "Beginnings are choices, Austin. You made yours a long time ago." He flinched, the truth landing heavily, but he didn't look away. He stepped closer, stopping just a few feet from the small family. The guests craned their necks. Camille stood motionless. Austin swallowed hard. "I thought I could build my life without facing the pain I caused. I told myself I'd make things right eventually, but seeing them..." His voice cracked again. "Skylar, I didn't just walk away from you. I walked away from them. I can't pretend I didn't." Skylar's jaw tightened. "Yes," she said softly. "You did." Nico tugged on Skylar's hand. "Mama." "He's sad." Skylar nodded gently. "Yes, baby. He's sad." Nora frowned, peering up at Austin. "Papa, you hurt Mama?" Gasps scattered across the audience. Austin sank to one knee again, his expression folding with remorse. "Yes, sweetheart, I did. And it is the biggest regret of my life." Nora's brows pinched. "Say sorry." The command, direct, pure, sincere, broke something in him completely. He bowed his head. "I'm sorry, Nora. I'm sorry, Nico. And Skylar. He looked at her slowly, as if afraid she might turn away. I am so deeply sorry. Skylar inhaled delicately. She had learned long ago that apologies don't erase history, but hearing him say the words, in front of the woman he was supposed to marry, in front of Houston society, in front of everyone he used to impress, forced a quiet shift inside her chest. The guests murmured softly, "He never mentioned children. This is unbelievable. Those kids, they look just like him." Camille finally took a step forward. Her gown rustled softly as she descended from the altar. Her eyes were gentle, her movements deliberate, unhurried. She approached Skylar first. The garden held its breath. Camille offered a small nod. "Your children are beautiful," she said, her voice steady yet filled with a sadness she carried gracefully. Skylar blinked, taken aback. "Thank you," she replied, equally calm. Camille shifted her attention to Austin, and her expression held no anger, only understanding. "Austin," she said softly, "I think this is where I step aside." Austin's eyes widened. "Camille." "No," she interrupted gently, raising a hand. "We both know your heart has been somewhere else for a long time." She smiled sadly. "Maybe I tried to ignore it. Maybe you tried to bury it. But it's clear now." The guests whispered again, but this time with admiration. Camille turned to Skylar and offered a sincere nod before joining her parents, exiting the space with dignity and tact. Now only Skylar, Austin, their twins, and the raw truth remained at the front of the garden. Austin turned fully to Skylar. "Sky, I never stopped loving you." Skylar's breath hitched. Those words once meant everything to her. And hearing them now, with the weight of years behind them, struck something deep. He continued, voice steadying. "I thought building my company would fix everything. I thought success would numb the guilt. Instead, every achievement reminded me of what I left behind." The twins watched, curious and unbothered by the intensity surrounding them. Austin extended his hands toward Skylar. "I know I don't deserve a second chance. I know I can't undo what I did, but I'm asking." His voice shook. "I'm asking if you could ever let me try again." Skylar looked down at his hands, then at her children who clung to her dress. She wasn't the 19-year-old girl he once swept off her feet. She wasn't the woman shattered by his departure. She had rebuilt her heart with her own hands. She had learned how to walk without leaning on anyone. Slowly she reached out, not to take his hands, but to steady her children as she stepped closer. Her voice was soft, but strong. "Austin, I won't make decisions for the woman I used to be, but I will make them for the mother I am now." Austin nodded, hope glowing behind his tears. She continued, "If you want a place in Nora and Nico's lives, that's a journey you'll have to earn, step by step, choice by choice. And you'll have to show them, and me, that you're ready." Austin breathed out shakily, a man receiving his first lifeline after drowning for years. "I'll do anything, Skylar." He lifted a small box from his jacket pocket, the same one he had once offered her under a Houston sunset. A simple platinum ring glinted inside. "I gave this to you once when I was a man who didn't understand what love required," he said softly. "Now, I offer it again as a man who finally does." He lowered himself fully to one knee. "Skylar, will you give me the chance to do this right?" The crowd erupted into soft murmurs, hands covering hearts, eyes misting. Skylar stared down at him, the father of her children, the man who had broken her, the man who now knelt humbly before her, and she felt a single tear slip down her cheek. She wasn't ready to say yes. She wasn't ready to say no, but she was ready to step into a future she chose. The truth had exploded. The wedding was over, but their story wasn't. The garden felt different now, lighter, quieter, yet filled with an electricity no one could name. The ceremony flowers still stood beautifully arranged, but the wedding itself had faded into the background. What remained was a moment that felt both delicate and monumental, a family slowly rediscovering itself. After Austin's unexpected confession, the guests sat in a stunned kind of silence. Some wiped tears. Others stared in awe at a story they hadn't expected to witness today. But the staff, unsure what to do, allowed the music to continue softly. In the background, a gentle piano melody drifting through the trees. Skylar stood near the aisle, Nora and Nico close at her sides. She wasn't sure what was supposed to happen next. There was no template for a moment like this. Her heart was beating fast, but her face carried the quiet strength she had learned to cultivate over years of raising her children alone. Austin approached her slowly, as if afraid the air around them might shatter. "Skylar, may I talk to you for a moment? Just over there?" He motioned toward an open area near the edge of the garden, where string lights hung above a small dance floor prepared for the reception. Skylar hesitated. Old wounds tugged at her, reminding her to protect her heart. But Nora tugged her hand gently. "Mama, can we dance?" her daughter whispered. Skylar blinked. "Dance?" The piano melody shifted into a soft waltz, as if responding to Nora's request. Skylar exhaled slowly. "All right," she murmured, "just for a moment." Austin's expression brightened with quiet hope. They walked together toward the small clearing. The dance floor gleamed under the shade of magnolia branches, polished smooth, waiting for the waltz that had been planned for a wedding that would never take place. But something better was unfolding. Skylar stepped onto the floor with caution, her hand resting gently on Nora's shoulder. Austin stood across from her, his posture humble, eyes searching hers with sincerity. "May I?" he asked softly, extending his hand, not demanding, not assuming, just offering. Skylar swallowed hard. She placed her hand in his, a gesture small in motion but enormous in meaning. He guided her gently into a slow waltz. The first steps were hesitant, uncertain. They moved like two people trying to remember a dance they once knew by heart but had forgotten how to lead. The space between them held years of unspoken emotion. Nora and Nico giggled and ran circles around them, their small shoes tapping lightly against the dance floor. They twirled themselves, imitating their parents' movements, their laughter rising like warm sparks into the afternoon air. Dolores watched from a few feet away, hands pressed to her chest. Her eyes glistened with tears she didn't bother hiding. "Oh, Lord," she whispered. "Thank you." The waltz continued. Austin cleared his throat softly, his voice low. "Skylar, I know an apology isn't enough. Not for what I did, not for what I missed." Skylar kept her gaze steady. "I'm listening." Austin inhaled deeply, guiding their steps with a gentle steadiness. "When you told me about the twins, I was overwhelmed. But that wasn't an excuse. I walked away from you because I was scared. Scared of responsibility, scared of disappointing my family, scared of losing the life I thought I needed." He paused as they turned slowly across the dance floor. "But the truth?" His voice cracked. "The truth is that walking away from you and from them is the biggest mistake I've ever made. I didn't just leave. I abandoned the people who deserve the best of me." Skylar felt her breath tremble. She wasn't ready to forgive him, not fully, but she couldn't deny the depth of his words or the sincerity in his tone. Austin continued, eyes soft with remorse. "You raised them on your own. You carried all the weight I should have carried too. And seeing them today, seeing them run to me with no judgment, with so much love," he swallowed, emotion thick in his throat. "It changed me." Nora twirled between them, twirling her dress until she got dizzy and stumbled against Skylar's leg. Skylar steadied her with one hand while maintaining the waltz. Nico jumped in front of Austin. "Papa, you dance good?" Austin laughed softly for the first time that day. "I'm trying, buddy." "Try harder," Nico said proudly, showing him a tiny footwork pattern he invented. Skylar couldn't help but laugh, a soft, genuine sound that warmed the entire dance floor. Austin watched her with quiet admiration. "I miss that," he said. "I miss your laugh." Skylar's smile faded as she looked away. "A laugh doesn't erase years, Austin." "I know," he replied gently. "But I want to earn every new one, if you'll let me." Dolores stepped closer, wiping her eyes. "Skylar, baby, look at you." She sniffed, overwhelmed. "You holding your own out here." Skylar felt her mother's pride like a warm blanket, steadying her. The music swelled gently. Austin guided her into one more step, careful not to overstep the boundaries she held tightly. "I'm not asking you to say yes to anything today," he murmured. "Not forgiveness, not a relationship, not a future." He paused, holding her gaze with tender sincerity. "I'm asking you to let me try, let me show up, let me be the father I should have been, and maybe one day, the man you deserved in the first place." Skylar didn't answer immediately. Her thoughts swirled, pain, hope, caution, longing, and the grounded strength she had built over 4 years of raising Nora and Nico alone. Finally, she spoke. "This dance," she whispered, "doesn't fix what happened, but it shows me something I needed to see." Austin nodded, patient. What's that? That you're capable of change. Austin let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. Nora tugged Skylar's dress again. Mama, you smiling? Skylar looked down, surprised to find a small smile forming without her permission. Maybe the first Nico clapped his hands. Family dance. Skylar, startled, looked at Austin. Austin smiled softly. If your mama agrees. Skylar hesitated, then took a deep breath and nodded. Nora and Nico squealed, joining their parents and turning the slow waltz into a sweet, messy circle dance. Their laughter filled the garden, replacing the tension that had once weighed heavily on the air. For the first time in years, they looked like a family, and everyone watching knew it. The music faded into a quiet instrumental hum as the waltz came to an end. Skylar stepped back slightly, letting the space return between her and Austin. But the twins had no such boundaries. Nora clung to the skirt of Skylar's dress, while Nico tugged gently on Austin's pant leg. Papa, Nico said, looking up with hopeful eyes. Pick me up. Skylar's breath caught. She wasn't prepared for that. Austin wasn't prepared either. His eyes widened, his lips parted as if someone had knocked the breath straight from his chest. Pick you up? He repeated, voice shaking. Nico nodded with full confidence. Yes, like Mama do. Up, up. A soft ripple of emotion passed through the small crowd still seated, watching the family with quiet reverence. Austin crouched down to Nico's level and extended his arms. Come here, buddy. Nico didn't hesitate. He bounded forward and leaped into Austin's embrace, legs wrapping around his waist as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Austin's arms instinctively tightened around him, his hand supporting the boy's back with the urgency of a father who'd been waiting years without knowing it to feel this weight in his arms. Nico giggled and rested his cheek against Austin's shoulder. You warm, he murmured. Austin closed his eyes, overwhelmed. You feel perfect, he whispered, though only Skylar heard it. Nora tugged Skylar's hand. Mama, I want up too. Skylar looked down at her daughter, then up at Austin. She hesitated. This moment was big, bigger than anything she had prepared for. But children didn't understand emotional complexities. They understood presence, comfort, warmth. Go ahead, baby, Skylar whispered. Nora ran over to Austin, arms lifted. Austin gently shifted Nico to one arm, clumsily at first, and then scooped Nora into the other arm. For the first time ever, Austin held both of his children. The sight nearly took Skylar's breath away. Austin swayed slightly under their combined weight, laughing awkwardly at himself. I'm not used to this. Nico tapped his shoulder. We not heavy, Papa. Mama say we big kids, but not heavy. Nora nodded proudly. We strong too. Austin kissed the top of her head before he even realized he'd done it. Skylar looked away, swallowing hard. She had imagined this moment in so many ways over the years. Him holding them, him speaking. To them, him loving them. But she had convinced herself it would never happen. And now it was happening right in front of her. Tenderly, naturally, beautifully, Nico pulled back slightly, studying Austin's face. Papa, where you been all this time? The garden fell silent again. Even the staff stopped moving. Austin froze. He looked over at Skylar, silently asking if she would step in. But Skylar stayed still. This moment wasn't hers to answer. It belonged to him. He adjusted his hold on the twins, took a breath, and faced them with steady eyes. I was scared, he said slowly. Nora frowned. Scared of what? Scared of being a good father, Austin admitted, vulnerability raw in his voice. I thought I wouldn't know how to take care of you. I thought I wasn't ready to be responsible for little lives. Nico tilted his head. But Mama not scared. Austin nodded. I know. Your Mama is brave, strong. She did everything I should have done too. The twins looked over at Skylar proudly. She the best, Nora declared. The best, Nico repeated. Austin's eyes softened. I know she is. He shifted his gaze to Skylar again, soft, remorseful, full of a respect she had long deserved. And I'm so sorry I wasn't here. Nico patted his cheek. You here now? Austin's voice cracked. Yes, buddy. I'm here now. Nora leaned her head against his shoulder. Are you staying? Skylar inhaled sharply. It was a question loaded with layers, a child's innocent curiosity tangled with an adult's deepest fear. Austin didn't look away from Nora as he answered. I'm staying, he whispered. I'm going to show up, every day I can. I won't disappear again. Skylar felt her knees weaken. Not because she believed him fully, trust wasn't rebuilt with words alone, but because she could hear the sincerity, the newness in his tone. He wasn't the same man who had run away years ago. Something had changed. Nico caught Austin's chin between his tiny fingers. You promise? Austin held his gaze, voice steady. I promise. Skylar blinked back the burn in her eyes. This was what she had wanted for her children. Not a fairy tale romance, not a dramatic reunion. Just a father willing to be present, accountable, honest. Austin lowered the twins gently to the ground. They clung to his hands, unwilling to let go. Watching them together filled the space with a warmth Skylar hadn't expected to feel today. Her guard didn't vanish. It wasn't meant to, but it softened just a little. Austin stepped closer to her, still holding Nora and Nico's hands. Sky, I want to do this right, not just as someone who loves you, but as someone who wants to earn your trust back, to be part of this family. Skylar met his gaze. Actions, Austin, not speeches. That's what matters. He nodded. I know, and I'm ready to show you. The twins each hugged one of Skylar's legs. Mama, Papa say he stay. Skylar placed a hand on each of their heads, her voice gentle. We'll see, baby. One day at a time. Austin accepted that answer with humility. Nora tugged her father's jacket. Papa, can we eat now? I hungry. Nico nodded. I want pie. Austin laughed softly, looking at Skylar. Pie, huh? Skylar didn't smile, but her expression wasn't cold. It was thoughtful. There's plenty inside. Austin exhaled in subtle relief. Then let's go together. And they did, a small, fragile healing unit, taking their first steps into a new beginning. The reception area glowed with warm lighting, the kind meant for celebration, but what unfolded inside. The River Oaks estate felt far more meaningful than any wedding reception could have offered. The formal table settings, the elegant linens, the lavish arrangements. Everything seemed to fade into the background as Skylar, Austin, Nora, and Nico walked in together. A quiet murmur rippled through the guests. They no longer whispered from confusion or judgment. Now they whispered with awe. Dolores followed a step behind, holding her purse close and shaking her head with a disbelief touched by gratitude. Look at God, she whispered to herself. Look at what he can do. Nora tugged Austin's jacket as they walked. Papa, you said pie. Austin smiled down at her. I did. And we're going to find some. Dolores overheard and chuckled. Well, if these fancy folks don't have pie, I brought some in my bag. Can't take y'all nowhere without being prepared. Nico gasped. Grandma, you got pie in there? I keep something sweet on me at all times, Dolores said proudly. Skylar shook her head with a faint smile. For a moment, she forgot about tension, forgotten heartbreak, forgotten the weight of everything that had happened. Life felt almost normal. They reached the dessert table, where an array of pastries and cakes sat untouched. Nora's eyes were immediately drawn to a chocolate mousse tray. Nico reached for a cookie shaped like a flower. Hold on, Skylar said gently. Small portions first, real food later. Austin bent down next to Nico. What do you like, buddy? Nico pointed at 3 different desserts. All of them. Austin laughed. Just like me when I was your age. Nora eyed him curiously. Papa, you like sweets too? Austin nodded. A lot, especially pie. Dolores cleared her throat pointedly. Speaking of pie, she unzipped her purse and pulled out a perfectly wrapped slice of sweet potato pie. The wrapping alone smelled like home, spiced, buttery, warm. Austin blinked. You brought that? Dolores raised an eyebrow. You think I walk into a fancy event without something real? Baby, please. Nico and Nora clapped. Pie. Austin looked touched, genuinely touched, in a way Skylar wasn't expecting. Miss Dolores, he said quietly. I haven't had your pie in years. You hadn't had a lot of things in years, she replied calmly though. Her tone wasn't sharp. It was honest, motherly, and deeply human. Skylar stiffened, but Dolores continued before tension could rise. But today's different. Today you showed up. And that counts. She handed him the slice. Austin took it with both hands, as if accepting something sacred. He tasted a small bite, closed his eyes, and exhaled. It tastes like I remember. Of course it does, Dolores said. Good things stay good. The twins crowded around him, waiting. Austin broke off 2 tiny pieces and gave them each a bite. Nora's eyes widened. Grandma, this good. Nico nodded aggressively. This the best pie ever. Dolores smirked. I know, baby. Skylar watched the scene quietly. Her family, and the man she once loved, sharing something so simple, so warm, so ordinary, and yet monumental. It wasn't about the pie. It was about belonging. It was about acknowledgement. It was about the soft place where healing begins. After dessert, the 4 of them found seats near a small fireplace inside the reception hall. The room had begun to empty. Many guests chose to leave quietly, understanding. The ceremony had transformed into something entirely unexpected. But those who remained watched the small family with gentle curiosity, moved by the depth of what they had witnessed. Austin settled onto a cushioned bench, and before he could fully sit, Nico crawled into his lap. Nora followed, curling up against Skylar's shoulder. Skylar eyed the twins. You two getting sleepy? Nora nodded, rubbing her eyes. I want to stay on you, Mama. Nico yawned so wide his bow tie tilted sideways. Papa warm. Austin looked up at Skylar slowly, as if asking whether it was okay for him to hold Nico like this. Skylar hesitated, then nodded once. It was a small gesture, but it carried a million layers. The twins snuggled in. Their small bodies relaxed, their breathing slowed, and their eyelids blinked heavier and heavier. They had run around, danced, absorbed emotions they didn't fully understand. Now they were winding down in the safest place they knew, their parents' arms. Dolores sighed softly, pressing a hand to her chest. Lord, you just showing out today. Skylar smiled faintly. Mama. No, baby, Dolores whispered, eyes glistening. I prayed for this. I prayed for peace. For you. For them. And look at them now. Austin shifted slightly, careful not to wake Nico. His voice dropped low. Dolores, I know I caused you a lot of worry, and I'm sorry for that too. Dolores nodded. You did, but sorrow's no place to live forever. What matters is what a man chooses next. Austin swallowed, his gaze drifting back to Skylar. I want to choose them, every day. Skylar's breath hitched again, not with pain this time, but something gentler. Something cautious but willing. She rested her hand lightly on Nora's back. One day at a time, Austin. He nodded. One day at a time. They sat together in the warm glow of the fireplace, the twins asleep across 2 laps, the remnants of sweet potato pies scenting the air, and a rare, beautiful quiet wrapping around the 4 of them. It wasn't perfection. It wasn't a promise of a flawless future. But it was real. It was honest. It was a beginning. If this moment touched you, please tap the like button and subscribe to Stories by Mr. Flex. Your support helps us share more powerful stories that celebrate healing, family, and second chances. The reception had softened into a warm glow, the type that settles over a room after the biggest storms have already passed. Music drifted lightly in the background, gentle enough not to disturb Nora and Nico, who were both asleep. Nora, curled against Skylar's side, Nico lying across both their laps with his tiny hand resting on Austin's sleeve. Skylar sat at the small round table positioned near the corner of the hall, a place where the overhead lights were dimmer and the chatter of guests faded into a hum. For the first time since walking into this wedding, she felt her heartbeat slow. Not settle, not fully calm, just slow enough to let her breathe. Austin pulled out the chair across from her and sat slowly, as if mindful of the weight of the moment. His tux jacket rested on the back of the chair, his sleeves rolled just high enough to show he'd carried the twins earlier. His face held a softness Skylar had not seen in years, one that wasn't about charm or impressing anyone. It was the look of a man trying to face the truth he'd avoided. Skylar kept her hand on the twins as they slept, grounding herself. She didn't speak, not yet. The years she spent raising these children alone had taught her discipline, how to wait, how to measure her words, how to protect her heart even when it was being pulled open again. Austin cleared his throat gently. Skylar. His voice wasn't firm the way it used to be when he presented at corporate events. It was almost shaky. I know today has been overwhelming for everyone, but I need to talk to you, really talk to you. Skylar lifted her eyes from the children to him. I'm listening, she said, careful, controlled. He exhaled deeply and looked down at the table before meeting her gaze again. I've been living with something for 4 years, he said. Something I should have said the day I walked out that door. You deserve to know what happened inside me. Why I made the worst mistake of my life. Skylar's expression remained steady, but inside her chest, emotion tightened. This was the conversation she never thought she'd hear. Austin folded his hands, then unfolded them, the movement restless and honest. I wasn't ready. Not for fatherhood, not for the pressure, not for the responsibility of 2 children. But that's not the whole truth. He paused, swallowed hard, then continued. I was scared of failing you. Skylar blinked, stunned. Failing me? Yes. He leaned forward slightly. Sky, you loved with everything you had. You gave me a world full of joy, your family, your community, your warmth. And I kept thinking, what if I wasn't enough for that? Skylar frowned gently. Austin, you didn't even give yourself a chance. I know, he whispered. I know, because fear made me run. I thought my career mattered more. I thought I needed to build everything before I could be anything to someone else. He looked toward the sleeping twins, voice breaking. And while I was chasing success, you were carrying all the weight I should have carried with you. Skylar inhaled slowly. Her voice, when she spoke, was soft but full of truth. Raising Nora and Nico without you was the hardest thing I've ever done. Austin's eyes reddened instantly. She continued, tone steady but emotional. Every morning I woke up praying I was doing enough. Every night I told them stories so they wouldn't notice something was missing. When they asked about you, I never spoke badly about you. I told them their father was someone they'd meet when the time was right. Austin closed his eyes, tears slipping down despite his effort to hold them back. You protected me, even when I didn't deserve it. Skylar nodded once. I protected them, and part of protecting them meant teaching them that their father wasn't a ghost, just someone who wasn't ready yet. Austin wiped his face with the back of his hand, overwhelmed. I'm sorry, he whispered. For every night you sat up alone, for every doctor's visit you went to without me, for every milestone I wasn't there to see. He swallowed. I missed everything, Sky. Their first steps, their first words. Even today, when they ran to me, I didn't feel like I deserved it. Skylar looked down at the twins. Children love with pure hearts, she murmured. They forgive long before adults do. They saw you and recognized something that was already theirs. Austin placed a trembling hand near Nico's small fingers, close enough to show reverence, far enough not to disturb him. I don't want to run anymore, he said. I don't want to hide behind work or fear. I want to be here. For them. For you. If you'll let me earn that. Skylar's breath caught. He lifted his gaze, voice low but steady. I'm not asking you to forget what happened. I'm not asking you to erase the pain. I'm asking for a chance to rebuild what I broke, piece by piece, slowly, the right way. A long silence settled between them. Not a cold silence, an honest one. A silence full of years they could not undo but could finally acknowledge. Skylar shifted slightly, brushing Nico's hair from his forehead. Austin, she said gently, I worked hard to find myself again after you left. I had to grow into a woman who didn't wait for apologies that seemed like they'd never come. He nodded, accepting every word. But tonight, she continued, when I walked in and saw you stop your whole world because of these children, I saw something different. She paused. I saw a man trying to be better. Austin let out a shaky breath of relief. I'm not ready to jump into anything, Skylar added cautiously, but I'm open to trying. Slowly, honestly, intentionally, Austin straightened, nodding with gratitude. That's all I hoped for. Skylar gave a small, tender smile, hesitant but real. We'll take it one day at a time. His eyes softened. I'll take every day I can get. They sat together in the dim glow of the room, the twins breathing softly between them, the weight of old pain finally shifting, no longer a burden but a bridge. Tonight was not a miracle, not a perfect ending. It was something better, the beginning of healing rooted in truth. Their hands didn't touch, but their hearts leaned, just slightly, toward the same direction for the first time in years. The reception hall had shifted into a calmer rhythm, the kind that settles in once. The big emotions have spilled out, and everyone is simply living in the afterglow. Soft music blended with the quiet chatter of guests who were giving Skylar and Austin space. Respectful enough to keep their distance, curious enough to glance over every few minutes. Skylar gently adjusted Nora and Nico so they were more comfortable in her lap. Their tiny breaths rose and fell in steady patterns, their cheeks warm from the excitement of the day. Seeing them asleep felt like watching peace settle across a long-tired heart. Austin slid his chair closer, not touching hers, but close enough that the space between them didn't feel like a wall anymore. His voice was calm, grounded. Sky, if we're going to do this the right way, I want us to lay everything out clearly. No misunderstandings. No rushing into something fragile. Skylar nodded. I agree. We need clarity. Her tone wasn't stern. It was mature, thoughtful, exactly the voice of a woman who had raised 2 children alone and learned to act with intention, not impulse. Austin rested his elbows lightly on his knees. I know I've missed a lot. I don't want to waste more time feeling sorry for myself. I want to show up every day, but I also know I have to earn that place. Skylar studied him carefully. You can start by being present, she said. Consistent. The twins shouldn't have to wonder where you are or when you'll call. Austin nodded immediately. Agreed. I'm ready to build a routine. We can set times, days, whatever works for you and the kids. Skylar brushed a curl from Nora's forehead. They're young, Austin. They don't process things the way adults do. If you say you're coming, you need to come. If you say you'll call, you need to call. Their trust is precious. I won't break it, he said quietly. Not again. A moment passed, warm and quiet. Skylar continued. I also think we should talk to a therapist. Not necessarily as a couple, but for communication, for co-parenting. To make sure we don't slip back into old habits. Austin breathed in slowly. I've actually been thinking the same thing, he admitted. A neutral place to unpack everything. I'm willing. She watched him closely, searching his expression for any trace of discomfort or defensiveness. She didn't see either. Instead, she saw sincerity, a depth she had once adored but lost sight of in the chaos of heartbreak. All right, she said gently. We'll make a plan together. Austin leaned back, almost in relief. Thank you, Sky. Really? Before she could respond, a tiny voice mumbled. Mama? Nora blinked awake, rubbing her eyes with the back of her small hand. Skylar smiled and kissed her forehead. Yes, baby? Nora twisted to look at Austin. Her curls bounced softly as she studied him through sleepy eyes. You still here? Austin's heart nearly collapsed at how innocent the question was. I'm right here, he whispered. I'm not going anywhere. Nora yawned, her voice slow and sweet. Good. 'Cause I want to dance with Daddy later. Skylar felt her chest tighten. Soft, tender, complicated emotion. Austin blinked a few times, trying to steady himself. You can dance with me anytime you want, he managed. Nora smiled, satisfied, and curled back up on Skylar's lap. A few seconds later, Nico stirred too, stretching like a small cat. His eyes opened halfway before drifting back closed, but he mumbled, Papa, don't leave. Austin reached out and gently rested his hand on Nico's back, lightly, careful not to wake him fully. I'm here, he whispered. I'm right here. Skylar watched the scene quietly. Her guard didn't drop all at once, but it softened, not because of romance or nostalgia, but because of what she saw right in front of her, a father trying, a man stepping up, a moment worth acknowledging. Austin lowered his hand and looked at Skylar. I want to build something real, not for show, not for today, for them, for us, whatever us becomes. Skylar's voice was steady. Then we need honesty, every step of the way. You'll get that from me, he said firmly. And patience, she added. You'll get that too. And boundaries. A faint smile touched his lips. Sky, just hand me the whole rule book. I'll sign it. She rolled her eyes at him, but a small laugh escaped, soft, reluctant, real. It was the first time she'd laughed with him in 4 years. Austin heard it, felt it, and let the sound settle into him like air he didn't know he'd been missing. Their moment was interrupted by the gentle arrival of Dolores, who touched Skylar's shoulder. Her eyes were wet, her smile tender. Baby girl, I've seen a lot of life, and right now, I see growth in this room. From all of you. Austin nodded respectfully. Thank you for always being there for them. Dolores gave him a look that was both a warning and a blessing. You have a second chance, Austin. Don't waste it. I won't, he promised. Dolores squeezed Skylar's shoulder once more before returning to her table. Skylar watched her mother walk away, then turned back to Austin. We'll figure out a schedule this week, and therapy sessions, and how to ease the twins into this new chapter. Austin nodded. Whatever pace feels right. Skylar hesitated, then said something she hadn't planned. They're happy tonight, really happy. It's been a while since I've seen them glow like this. Austin glanced at the twins, his voice thick. They deserve that. And so do you. Skylar didn't reply, but her silence wasn't cold. It was thoughtful, careful, hopeful. For the first time, the future didn't feel like a threat. It felt like something they could build, slowly, deliberately, honestly, together, but with space, connected, but not rushed, rooted in truth instead of fear. Tonight didn't erase the past, but it opened a door neither had expected to walk through again. And both of them, Skylar more cautiously, Austin more gratefully, stepped forward. The reception was winding down, but no one seemed in a rush to leave. Not after everything they had witnessed. The music softened into a low, comforting blend of piano and guitar, the kind that let conversations settle into warm pockets around the room. Skylar shifted Nora and Nico, who were now fast asleep, their tiny heads resting peacefully against her. Their curls brushed her arm, and for the first time in years, Skylar felt a steady calm moving through her. Austin walked beside her as they made their way toward a quieter corner near the large windows overlooking the Houston night. The bayou shimmered below, reflecting streetlights and the glow of downtown towers. Houston never slept, but tonight it felt gentler, quieter, almost blessing their moment. Skylar eased into a cushioned bench and laid Nora and Nico on either side of her. They barely stirred. Austin sat across from her, elbows resting loosely on his knees. For a few seconds, they simply watched their children breathe. "They look peaceful," Austin whispered. "They are," Skylar replied softly. "Today was a lot for them. And for you," he added. "For all of us." Skylar didn't disagree. She lifted her eyes to meet his, steady and present. "It changed things. Not in a rushed way, but in a real way." Austin nodded, absorbing her tone, the clarity, the control, the strength. "I'm ready to show up every day, one step at a time. Therapy, schedule, consistency, whatever it takes." Skylar studied him, searching for signs of hesitation. She didn't find any. Instead, she saw a man who had finally accepted the weight of his own choices and was willing to lift that weight with both hands. Before she could speak again, Dolores approached their table with a plate in her hand and a raised eyebrow. "Now I know y'all aren't sitting here without tasting this sweet potato pie," she teased. "You can't rebuild a family on empty stomachs." Austin actually chuckled, a warm sound that felt natural coming from him. "Thank you, Dolores," he said as she set the plate down. "Don't thank me yet. Let's see if you can handle real flavor," Dolores replied with a playful smirk. Skylar shook her head, amused. "Mama, please behave." "Baby, I'm behaving," Dolores said as she walked away. "I'm letting the man eat pie instead of questioning him for an hour." Austin swallowed a sudden laugh and picked up a fork. "Your mother is incredible." "She is," Skylar said proudly. "She's been everything." He took a bite and blinked slowly. "This is amazing." "I told you," Skylar said, unable to hide her amusement. Austin took another bite, then set the fork down. "Sky, I need you to know something. I'm not trying to erase the past. I know I can't. But I am committed to honoring the future. With you. With them." He nodded toward the twins. Skylar felt the words land gently, not heavy, not rushed, just true. "I'm willing to build something," she said. "But it has to be rooted in honesty, real honesty." "You'll have it," he promised. Skylar adjusted Nico's bow tie slightly where it had twisted during his sleep. "I want the twins to grow up seeing two parents who communicate, who don't hide things, who don't let fear make decisions." Austin's gaze softened. "Fear won't run my life again." Skylar nodded, a calm acceptance settling into her. "Good. Because I won't raise them in confusion." "You won't," he said firmly. The music shifted again, something soulful, something warm. A few couples returned to the dance floor. The soft glow of gold lighting washed over everything. Dolores returned, but this time with a knowing look. "Skylar, baby." Austin asked if he could attend church with us tomorrow morning. Skylar froze for just a breath. "He did." Austin cleared his throat. "I didn't want to assume, but I'd like to go, if that's all right." Church was never about performance for Skylar. It was community, healing, foundation. To bring someone there wasn't casual. It meant something. She searched his face. Not for perfection, not for answers, but for sincerity. She found it. "All right," Skylar said. "Come with us." Dolores smiled like her heart had been waiting for that sentence. She gave a small nod and drifted back into the reception. Austin exhaled. Thank you. This doesn't mean everything is fixed, Skylar said gently. But it does mean we're moving forward. That's all I want, he replied. Outside the massive windows, Houston lights shimmered under the night sky. The city felt like a witness to their new beginning, quiet, steady, and full of possibility. Minutes later, guests began saying their goodnights. A few walked over to Skylar and Austin, offering support, smiling at the twins, whispering blessings. Not one person looked at Skylar with pity, not after what they had seen. She walked into this event with dignity and left with her head higher than ever. When the last of the guests drifted out, Austin looked at Skylar again. Do you need help carrying them to the car? Skylar hesitated, then nodded. Yes. Thank you. He stood and gently lifted Nico, holding him against his chest with the kind of careful strength Skylar had once dreamed of seeing. She carried Nora, who nestled into her shoulder without waking. Together they walked out of the venue, 4 silhouettes under the warm Houston night. The air outside felt rich and calm. Trees rustled softly. Somewhere in the distance, a choir rehearsal wrapped up at a small church, voices rising in harmony. Skylar paused beside her car. Austin waited, Nico still asleep in his arms. Sky, he said softly. She turned. This is a second chance I never thought I'd get, and I'm grateful. For you, for them, for tonight. Skylar felt the weight of the moment settle in her chest, but it wasn't heavy. It was grounding, centering. True, she stepped closer, meeting his eyes. Nobody can shame a woman who knows her worth, Austin. Today wasn't about you proving anything. It was about me standing firm in who I am and showing our children what strength looks like. Austin swallowed, moved. I know, and I'm honored to walk into this next chapter with you. Skylar offered a small, genuine smile. Let's take it slow. Let's take it real. Real, he echoed. As they buckled the twins into their car seats, Houston's night sky stretched wide above them, open, forgiving, full of new beginnings. Skylar closed the door softly, looked up at the sky, and exhaled. This wasn't the ending she imagined years ago. This was better. This was truth. This was healing. This was the beginning of a family rebuilt with intention. She got into the car, glanced at Austin one last time, and whispered to herself, "We're going to be all right." Family, if this story touched you tonight, please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us share more life-changing stories right here on Stories by Mr. Flex.